Simo Häyhä with diuresis Häyhä with diuresis, Part 1 Inch the White Silence, Finland, December 1939. The winter war begins. The forest was painfully quiet, snow covered everything, the trees, the earth, even the sound of footsteps. The air was so cold it stung the inside of the nose, freezing breath into thin white threads. Somewhere beyond the tree line, the Soviet Red Army was advancing with overwhelming might, tanks, artillery, and thousands of infantry, convinced they would crush Finland in days. But here, in this silence, a different war was taking shape. A war fought not by numbers, but by shadows. By patience. By a men who carried stillness like a weapon. Simo Häyhä lay completely motionless beneath a layer of snow, his white camouflage blending so perfectly with the world around him that even the wind could not tell where the men ended and the forest began. Only his eyes moved. They scanned the tree line with calm precision, catching the slightest flicker of movement. The Soviets arrived far ahead. A Soviet platoon moved between the pines, their breath rising like thin steam in the freezing air. Boots crunched over the crusted snow. Their green coats made them stand out like smudges on blank paper. Simo adjusted the iron sights of his M/28-30 rifle. He never used a scope. Scopes could reflect sunlight, could fog, could betray a sniper's position. His cheek touched the cold wood, his heartbeat slowed, voices carried faintly across the snow. Hurry! Move! A sergeant turned his head, paused, lifted his arm to signal the men forward. Simo squeezed the trigger. Crack! The sergeant folded silently into the snow. The rest of the unit froze, panicking. Some knelt. Some dropped flat. One shouted orders, but fear turned the words into useless noise. They had no idea where the shot came from. Simo shifted his aim a few centimeters. Second shot, third shot. Within seconds, 3 men lay dead, and Simo didn't move, not a sound, not a breath louder than the wind. Then, like a snow fox disappearing into a drift, he slid backward into cover, vanishing completely. Life in the white hell. Simo returned to the Finnish lines just before dark. Men sat around a small stove, warming their hands, chewing frozen bread. When they saw him, a few smiled tiredly. Back already, Simo? Anything interesting out there? He shrugged, removing his white hood. A few, he said simply, a few. That was all he ever said. One soldier leaned closer. Was it 3? 5? More? Simo wiped frost from his rifle barrel. It doesn't matter, he replied softly. Tomorrow there will be more. He didn't mean it as arrogance. He never bragged. He never smiled at death. To him, this was a job. A job he performed with precision and a sense of responsibility that bordered on the sacred. The men behind the rifle. At night, Simo lay inside a dugout, wrapped in blankets, melting clumps of snow in a tin cup. The other men talked loudly, jokes, stories, singing to fight off fear. Simo sat quietly, listening. He wasn't antisocial. He just didn't need to speak. A lieutenant entered, nodding to the men. Then he approached. Simo Häyhä, the officer said, crouching. Command says Soviet scouts are probing the southern line tomorrow. We need someone to discourage them. Simo nodded. I'll go. You sure? It's dangerous out there alone. Simo looked into the fire, the flames dancing in his calm, unblinking eye. So is letting them come closer. The lieutenant exhaled, half nervous, half relieved. You know, he said slowly, the men are starting to talk. Talk. They say you can't be seen. That you disappear into snow. That you don't even leave tracks. Simo blinked. I leave tracks, he said, just not for long. The lieutenant chuckled uneasily. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Simo finished the melted snow from his cup. He closed his eyes and rested his head on his pack. The war outside raged like a storm, but inside this silent man, there was only stillness. Soviet fear. The next day, Soviet units complained of an invisible marksman haunting the forest. They called him the White Death, not a soldier, but a force, not a man, but winter itself. Commander sent counter-snipers after him. Entire artillery batteries blasted the woods at the faintest sign of movement. Once, Simo fired a single shot. Minutes later, shells obliterated half a forest quadrant, but he survived, every time, because Simo didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like a hunter, and the forest was his home. A duel in the pine-sown afternoon, Simo spotted something glinting far away, a reflection. A faint one. Brief. Too perfect to be an accident. A sniper. Simo lowered his head slowly, not a twitch, not a rustle. He watched the spot for 20 minutes, then 30. Then 40. The glint came again. Sun on glass. The enemy had a scope. Simo breathed out. Bad choice. He thought. He pressed the stock to his cheek, calm, slow, patient. When he fired, the shot was so precise that it passed directly through the Soviet sniper's scope, shattering it, and killing the men behind it instantly. A perfect bullet. A perfect shot. The forest fell quiet again. The growing legend. By January 1940, the Finnish HQ had realized something extraordinary. Simo Häyhä was killing Soviet soldiers at a rate no one had ever seen. 10 a day, 15 a day, sometimes more. Officers came to speak with him. Journalists tried to photograph him. Foreign observers asked to meet him. Simo always avoided them. He'd sit in the trench, quietly carving a piece of wood or checking his rifle. When asked about his rising fame, he would shrug and answer, "I'm just doing my duty. Nothing more." Simo Häyhä with diuresis. Häyhä with diuresis, Part 2. The White Death hunted, January 1940. The winter tightens. The cold deepened, not just ordinary cold, but the kind that froze eyelids shut, cracked skin like old parchment, and turned spilled blood into red crystals before it touched the snow. The Finnish forests were a white graveyard, silent except for the distant thunder of artillery and the groaning of frozen trees bending under ice. Simo Häyhä moved through this landscape as if he were born from it. The wind cut across his face, carrying the faint smell of gunpowder. He lowered himself behind a mound of snow, adjusting the iron sights of his rifle. Snowflakes settled on his hood, his gloves, his eyelashes, untouched by body heat. He was perfectly still. Ahead, Soviet infantry trudged through the ice, stepping heavily, clumsily. Their thick coats and lack of camouflage made them stand out like dark stains against the blinding white. Simo watched them through the iron sights. He waited. He breathed. He did not blink. Then, crack, the first soldier dropped. Shouts erupted. Men scrambled for cover that didn't exist. Simo fired again, and again. 3 men fell within seconds, their bodies disappearing into the white powder. The Soviets take notice hours later. Deep inside a Soviet command tent, officers huddled around a map lit by a single lantern. Snow blew under the canvas walls, and the cold seeped into their bones. A Soviet major slammed his fist onto the table. Enough. He is one man. One. A captain cleared his throat carefully. Comrade Major, the soldiers say he is not a man. A ghost. A devil. The major glared. Silence. Bring all available snipers. Now. Within hours, 3 of the Soviet Union's best sharpshooters were deployed with a single objective: kill the White Death. Simo's senses back in the forest. Simo felt the change. It was something in the air, the way the forest grew still, the way the snow settled unnaturally, the way shadows lingered where they shouldn't. He whispered to himself, "They're hunting me now." He almost smiled, not because he enjoyed killing, but because he accepted the challenge. Simo melted into the snow, adjusting his white suit. He held a mouthful of snow between his teeth to hide his breath. His rifle rested on packed ice to prevent muzzle flash. He waited, minutes, hours, then, a faint glint. A reflection no bigger than a fingernail, just for a moment. A Soviet sniper. Simo exhaled slowly, letting the air cool inside the scarf so no vapor escaped. He fired. His bullet pierced the enemy's scope and killed the sniper instantly. 1 down. But there were more. The artillery stormed. The Soviets, furious and frightened, unleashed their next plan: artillery extermination. The forest shook violently as shells fell like iron hail. Simo sprinted between trees, diving behind snowbanks, feeling the blasts vibrate through his body. Trees shattered into splinters. Snow exploded upward, showering him with ice. A young Finnish soldier shouted to him, "Simo. They're trying to bury you alive." Simo wiped blood from his cheek. A branch had sliced it open. "Let them try," he said calmly. A shell landed close. The impact threw him backward, burying him in snow. Darkness closed in for a moment, then he pushed himself up, coughing ice from his throat. He lived. Again, the duel in the ravine 2 days later. Simo sensed another presence. A skilled one. This sniper wasn't clumsy. He wasn't nervous. He didn't expose his position. He was patient, almost as patient as Simo. For hours they stalked each other between ridges. Silence, snow, breath, stillness. Simo lay flat, Eyes scanning for the subtlest imperfection in the snow, then he saw it, not metal, not movement, just a wrong shape. A tiny dip where the snow settled strangely. Simo fired without hesitation. A muffled cry echoed. When Finnish soldiers reached the spot, they found a Soviet master sniper slumped forward, his white camouflage flawless, but not enough. Simo had noticed what no one else could, the wound that almost ended him. March 6, 1940. The day was silent, too silent. Simo crawled along a ridge, scanning the forest beyond. Snow clung to his hood. The air smelled of iron. He saw movement, a Soviet officer, unaware, vulnerable. Simo aimed. Just as he squeezed the trigger, whistle, a Soviet soldier fired first. The bullet struck Simo's lower face. It shattered his jaw, tore through his cheek, destroyed half his mouth. He fell backward, blood spraying across the snow. Finnish soldiers heard the shot. Simo, call medics. He's alive. Move, move. They pulled him from the ridge as Soviet machine guns opened fire. Blood poured down his coat, soaking the white suit crimson. His vision blurred, pain erupted through his skull. He felt snow melting under the heat of his own blood. Then everything went dark, the miracle awakening. For days, Simo lay in a coma. His face swollen beyond recognition, repaired hastily by field surgeons. On March 13, 1940, he opened his eyes. He tried to speak but only managed a painful groan. A nurse leaned over, shocked. You're awake. Simo, you're awake. The doctor rushed in. Häyhä, can you hear me? He nodded faintly, then the doctor sighed. The war is over. The armistice was signed today. Simo blinked slowly. He had fought the entire winter war, and woke on the day it ended. Simo Häyhä with diuresis. Häyhä with diuresis. Part 3, The Men Who Returned from the Snow. March 1940, Field Hospital, Finland. The smell of antiseptic drifted lazily through the dim, makeshift ward. Outside, snow still fell, thick, soft, quiet. It was so strange, how peaceful the world looked through a window while men inside struggled for breath, for survival, for a future. Simo Häyhä lay motionless on a narrow cot, half his face bandaged, eyes half open but barely aware. His jaw had been torn apart, he looked like he had been carved from broken porcelain. Yet his chest rose and fell steadily. A nurse hovered over him with careful tenderness. He should be dead, she whispered to the doctor. He isn't, the doctor replied. He's Simo. There was something unbreakable about him. Something stubborn, almost defiant, even in unconsciousness, because outside, Finland had just signed a peace treaty. The winter war was over, but Simo was still fighting his own. The first breath of spring weeks passed. Snow melted. Frozen lakes cracked open with deep thunder, releasing the trapped water beneath. Villages began to rebuild. Families walked through ruins looking for pieces of their old lives, and on a calm morning in April, Simo was helped out of bed by two nurses. His legs trembled. His face throbbed with pain. The right side of his jaw felt alien, heavy with medical reconstruction and fresh scar tissue, but he stood, slowly, carefully, stubbornly. A mirror was placed near his bed. He had not seen himself since the day he was shot. Simo looked at the stranger in the reflection, swollen lips, pale scar lines, a jaw that no longer fit perfectly the way nature had shaped it. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He simply touched the mirror with two fingers and whispered, still here. Returning home summer 1940. Simo returned to his family farm in Rajärvi. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. Birds swept silently across the lakes. The forest, his forest, welcomed him home with its ancient, patient quiet. Villagers greeted him with awe. Is it true, Simo? Over 500. Did you really face 100 Russians alone? What happened on that hill? Simo only smiled gently. I did what I could. His mother embraced him with tears in her eyes. His father gripped his shoulder with silent pride. The small family home felt warmer than any fire, and soon, Simo found himself doing what he loved most, walking quietly through the woods with a hunting rifle, watching elk step through the morning mist. It felt right, natural, like the war belonged to another lifetime. But legends don't retire easily. The legend spreads across Europe. Whispers grew. A Finnish sniper had done the impossible. 500 confirmed kills in just 100 days, using iron sights, surviving artillery barrages, outsmarting elite Soviet Marksman vanishing into snow like a ghost. Journalists tried to find him. Army officials wanted interviews. Simo refused them all. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to live, but the world wouldn't let him disappear. A letter arrived in late summer. Corporal Häyhä, you are hereby awarded the Cross of Liberty, First Class. Your service to Finland will be remembered forever. He accepted it quietly, placed the medal in a drawer, and went back to feeding his dogs. The war he couldn't escape. Finland became entangled again in war during the continuation war. The Soviets returned, stronger, angrier, and more determined to crush the country once and for all. Many expected Simo to rejoin the fight. Officers visited him. Häyhä, your country needs you again. You are a symbol, our men look up to you. You don't have to go to the front. Just help train our snipers. We need you, Simo. He looked out at the forest, thinking then, my jaw is still healing. Simo said softly, my rifle hand is not steady. It wasn't a lie. He was not the same man physically, but deeper inside, he knew something else. A man gets one lifetime of killing. He had already used his. Still, he helped train younger soldiers, taught them silence, patience, breathing, and how not to die. They listened to him like a priest delivering sacred scripture, because Simo didn't speak like a warrior. He spoke like a man who had lived with death and survived it. A quiet man in a changing world. Years passed, Finland rebuilt, the world moved on from its great wars, building new cities, new nations, new fears. Simo lived quietly. He hunted. He fished. He bred dogs. He walked in forests for hours without saying a word. Sometimes children from nearby villages approached him cautiously. Is it true you were the White Death? Simo would smile. That's just what they called me. What were you really? He paused, then answered simply, a farmer. Because that's what he had always been. The last winter the years took their slow toll. Arthritis claimed his joints, old wounds ached in the cold. His right jaw remained stiff until the end, but his eyes, sharp, clear blue, never dimmed. He spent his final days in a veteran's home, sitting by a window that overlooked a stand of tall pine trees. Nurses said he often stared at the forest for hours. No one knew what he saw in that silence. Maybe memories, maybe ghosts, maybe nothing at all. When Simo Häyhä died in 2002 at age 96, a hush fell over Finland. Flags were lowered, newspapers carried his photo. The quiet men with the iron eyes. Soldiers saluted, hunters whispered his name with reverence. A nation remembered. Legacy of a silent warrior. Simo Häyhä didn't fight for fame or medals or hatred. He fought because his home was under attack. He fought because he was asked. He fought because he could, and when the war ended, he stopped and returned to the snow he loved. To this day, the forests of Finland still whisper of him. A man so patient he could lie motionless in -40°C for hours. A man so deadly he stopped entire Soviet divisions from advancing. A man so calm he shot without blinking. A man so humble he never spoke of it. The Soviets called him the White Death, but his own people called him something greater, Simo. A Finnish soldier. A quiet protector. A man who became legend and never asked to be one. The last shot. Finland. Winter 1998. The winter forest was quiet in a way only Finland could produce. Snow drifted softly, as if the world were trying to cover itself from time. Tall pines stood motionless, ancient witnesses to a life shaped by cold and silence. Along a narrow path, near the village of Ruokko, an elderly man walked slowly through the deep snow. His steps were steady, his breath slow, his posture straight despite the years. Simo Häyhä, old, gray, but his one remaining eye still held that cold, sharp fire, the fire of a man who had spent a lifetime listening to silence. He stopped beside a familiar spruce, laid a hand on the rough bark, closed his eyes. Here he had hunted as a boy, here he had taken his first rifle into the forest. Here he learned to breathe with the wind and move with the snow. Silence had always been his teacher, his shield, his home. The visitor. A week later, a young journalist came knocking on Simo's door. He had heard the stories, the impossible stories, of the White Death. He had come to record a final interview with the most deadly sniper in human history. Simo welcomed him with the same quiet politeness he had shown for decades. He offered tea. He sat by the window, where pale winter light washed gently across the wooden walls. The journalist began nervously, Mr. Häyhä, is it true you killed over 500 Soviet soldiers? Simo sighed softly, as though he'd been asked about the weather. Numbers are not important. But how did you do it? How can one man? Simo lifted his hand, stopping the question. I did only what needed to be done. Anyone would do the same for their home. The journalist hesitated. Do you regret it? Simo looked at the snow outside, his expression grew distant, thoughtful. After a long pause, he answered quietly, war is not about regret. It is about survival. Ours, or theirs. I survived. The young man fell silent. He realized he was not speaking to a killer, but to someone who had carried unimaginable weight without letting it crush him. Before leaving, he noticed an old hunting rifle on the wall, worn, well-maintained. You still hunt? For the first time, Simo smiled. A small, shy, almost boyish smile. Of course. I am still myself. The final winter, the winter of 2001, came harsh and early. Simo's body, worn by years and old wounds, began to grow weaker. His jaw often ached in the cold. Sometimes the right side of his face went numb, just as it had on the day fate nearly ended his life. Veterans visited often. They chopped his wood, fixed his door, brought food. They never called him a legend. They said, "Thank you, Simo. Without you, many of us wouldn't be here. You did more than any man ever could." He always replied the same way, "We did it together." But everyone knew this was not true. Some wars are won by armies. This one had been stopped, at least in part, by a single, quiet man lying in the snow. His last morning, April 12, 2002. A nurse entered his room at the veteran's home. Simo was already awake, sitting by the window. He wore a clean gray sweater. On his lap rested a book about forest animals. The nurse smiled. "You're up early, Simo." He slowly turned his head, his eye drifting toward the falling snow. "Today is good snow," he whispered. She took a step closer. Simo stared at the winter outside, at the snow that had always been his companion. He smiled, softly, quietly, the smile of a man who had lived exactly as he believed he should. His breathing slowed, became gentle, warm, then faded away. He left the world the same way he had moved through it, silent, calm. In the snow, after Simo, the small Finnish church overflowed. During the funeral, soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder with farmers. Hunters bowed their heads. Children watched quietly, unsure of the weight of the men being honored. Fresh snow covered the rooftops, snow that Simo would have approved of. They placed a simple plaque on his grave. Simo Häyhä with diuresis. Häyhä with diuresis, 1905-2002. A quiet man who protected his home in time. Finland raised memorials. Snipers studied his techniques. His name was whispered with respect across the world. But what mattered more were the ordinary people, families who survived because of him, villages he protected, generations who owed their existence to a silent farmer with a steady hand. Parents told their children, war came to Finland, and one man became the snow. A legend written in winter. Simo Häyhä was not a warrior by nature. He was a hunter. A farmer. A quiet man who loved forests and simple work. But when war came, he became something else. He became the calm inside the storm. He became winter's sharpness. He became the white death, not for glory, not for hatred, but because his home needed him. And somewhere in the Finnish woods, in the silver light of winter, some swear you can still hear it, one perfect, steady shot echoing through the trees. Crack, silence returns, and the snow remembers.